If you truly want to master a second language, you must accept one thing. You must accept when we were babies, we didn't learn languages through grammar textbooks or learning tons and tons and memorizing vocabulary. No, we learn by living in that world, by living in that language environment. For example, when we were a baby, we would see a fluffy, four-legged, golden little creature walking by, and we point to it. And mom would say, dog. And we would say, dog. And at this point, we don't really know what dog is, but the next time you see a fluffy, four-legged creature that is brown walking by and your mom says, dog, now you have a pretty good idea of what dog is. And later on, you'll learn like a dog, or the dog, or dogs, or maybe cats. And then you'll learn dogs and cats. And then you'll learn the phrase, it's raining cats and dogs. So this is the way we become fluent in our mother language, our first language. And we become fluent in our first language before we even get to preschool. Before we learn a single grammar rule, before we are forced to memorize any vocab, we're already fluent speakers of our first language. You can do the exact same thing with a second language. Okay, I can understand you're a little apprehensive. You're probably saying, okay, but I already have a first language. There's interference from my first language. But that's only if you let it interfere with learning a second language. If you truly want to master a second language, you must accept one thing. You must accept becoming a baby all over again in that second language. Whether it's your first language, your second language, or 10th language that you're learning, there's always a set trajectory for how you learn that language. First, you acquire individual words, dog, and then maybe simple phrases, dogs, the dogs, and then you'll learn maybe short sentences like, I like the dog. Eventually, you graduate to more complicated sentences. The dogs are rolling on the ground, squealing and laughing. Okay, dogs don't really squeal and laugh, but you get my point. In order to master a second language, you must be able to become a child again in that language. And this is something that's really hard for a lot of us to do. We are adults. We are not babies, and we know what a dog is. We know what a cat is. How are we going to do that in a second language? Okay, I understand your apprehension. So what I want to do is introduce you to a concept beloved by foreign language teachers across the world, and it's something called the N+1 theory. So N is your current level in a language, and +1 is the next stage of acquisition. So what this means is the materials you should be exposing yourself to should just be slightly out of your comprehension range. So if you're reading a book, you should be able to understand about 70% of what is in that book. If you're watching a TV show, if you're watching a movie, if you're listening to a podcast, you should be able to understand 70% of what is in there. If you're familiar with the concept of flow, this is what you should be aiming for in the materials you're reading in that language. You should be engaged. You should be pretty engaged in the material, but there still should occasionally be times when you are encountering a word or a phrase that you don't know. So a good way to help you with this is something called a graded reader. So if you just Google graded readers and then the language you're learning on Google, you should be able to find a lot of resources. Most of these are books, but there's also audiobooks, things like that. So what it is basically graded literacy standards. So for example, if you have a preschool Korean graded reader, this is the reading level of a native Korean speaker at preschool age. And then first grade would be when that native speaker is in first grade. So it will get progressively harder until you get to the end of high school. So a good way to practice this is something I would like to recommend. It's called Talk to Me in Korean Stories. So this is not a sponsored ad, by the way. I just really love Talk to Me in Korean. So what this app does is you download it and then you take a placement test, and it's for reading specifically. And you get into a level, either 1 through 10, somewhere in the middle. And what it is they'll have stories, short stories, and articles that are more kind of like current affairs that will test you and help you get to the next level. Hopefully, eventually you'll get to level 10, graduate, and then you're pretty much a fluent speaker of Korean at that point. So the lesson of the day is that in order to become fluent, a master in a second language, you have to check your ego at the door and be willing to become a child in that language that you're learning. And to become a child in that language means you must be willing to make mistakes. Lots and lots and lots of mistakes. You may not remember now, but when you were a baby, I'm sure you made tons and tons of errors, like grammar errors, subject-verb agreement errors. You probably said the wrong word for some object in the world, and your mom and your dad or your friends or maybe your teachers, they corrected you. But that's how you learned. And you are gonna learn a second language the exact same way. If you don't, it'll be so difficult for you to become fluent in that language. And so if you're watching until now, I just wanna say thank you so much, and you are a trooper, and you can become fluent in that language. Trust me. So if you enjoyed today's lesson, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, share this video with your friends, and leave a comment in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. 화이팅! 또 봐요!